Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this evening's live streamed presentation in collaboration with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. This virtual event is being brought to you by the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEEC, which operates the Los Alamos Nature Center. The Nature Center is currently closed due to COVID-19, but we still have lots of ways you can interact and connect with nature. You can check the PEEC website, that's peaknature.org, for our Take It Outside initiative, or for lots more live stream presentations like this one. And I just wanted to give one quick shout out to our wonderful members, donors, staff, and volunteers who are making it possible for us to continue offering programming at this time.
Hello, this is Zach Baker. Welcome to the July Mountaineers meeting. This is number 5 in our Zoom meeting challenge. We're happy to see so many people calling in. Last month was actually a record with something like 321 people on the Zoom call watching our talk on Lechuguilla Cave. So that's pretty darn exciting. And thanks again to Beth for organizing the Zoomness for us. It would be very hard without her. Great talk tonight. Excited to hear about it. I think without further ado, we can hand it over to Rod McCready to introduce our speaker.
I've known tonight's speaker for a long time. He was in the same class as one of my sons through elementary school, and he and his family are longtime members of the Mountaineers Club. He started climbing in elementary school with the encouragement and participation of his dad. And he tells me when he went off to college, his enthusiasm and participation in that accelerated. And he seems pretty happy about that. He's also an avid mountain biker and snowboarder, so an all-around outdoor enthusiast. He also teaches climbing at the outdoor education at Cornell, where he's starting his 3rd year as a physics major in August. So I think he's well qualified to talk on this subject. So let's welcome Phil Martin.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm Phil. I'm going to talk about my trip to El Potrero Chico this past winter. So yeah, so I guess just like with any other good trip, this all started with just like a killer team of people. There were 4 of us. We all met at school in Ithaca. So just like going through all of us, there was Michael. Michael's a good friend of mine. He graduated last spring. So he's currently at grad school in Austin, but he's originally from Phoenix. And unfortunately, I couldn't find a better photo of him, but that's him working on this cool 12 when we were down in Mexico. Then there was Drake too. So Drake was a senior this year. So he just graduated, and he's originally from the Bay Area. And Drake is kind of like my trad dad. I don't know. He's taught me most of what I know about trad climbing in the last couple of years. And so he was like my primary partner on this trip. And then there was Dylan, who was like mostly partnering with Michael on their climbs. And Dylan's actually a fellow New Mexican. He's from Sandia Park, but we also met at school. But Dylan is just like one of my biggest climbing partners. Like we climb a lot together down here in New Mexico when we're both here. Yeah, and both of us are like mostly psyched on like harder sport climbing, but I don't know, sometimes we like to torture ourselves on like weird things like the needle and the Sandias, which is what this photo is from last summer. And then there's me. Yeah, so I'm gonna be a junior this spring, but I grew up here in Los Alamos. And yeah, like Rod said, I kind of started climbing like early elementary school, but I like kind of started taking it a little more seriously when I started college after meeting like cool people like these guys. So yeah, so that was kind of the group that went down. And so where we went is this awesome place called El Potrero Chico, or EPC. And it's located like in the Chihuahuan Desert in Nuevo Leon in like northeastern Mexico, next to this small town of Hidalgo, like just north of Monterrey. And it's actually only like 3 hours from Laredo, Texas by car. So pretty close to us actually. But yeah, so the name El Potrero Chico translates to the little corral. And you can kind of see why from like the satellite view, because the like limestone mountains there kind of form this like fence around this inner corral area. I don't know how to describe that. But yeah, it's really cool. And there are like a bunch of these all around this area in Mexico. But yeah, like the geology that creates these like formations is actually super fascinating. And I'm definitely no geology expert. And I'm not even sure any of you actually want to hear this, but I think it's just so cool how it forms. So like basically the way I understand it is that like this entire region at some point was this like ancient marine basin. And then periods of like repeated evaporation and flooding caused these huge salt deposits to form like on the floor. So then later, like as other sediment built up on top, which I guess eventually formed the limestone that we see today, high pressure and compaction caused like layers of high density limestone to sit on top of these huge pockets of salt. But salt, like this is where like it's just so cool. So salt, because of its rigid crystal structure, like can't compress too much under like all this pressure. So you just end up having these pockets of like low density salt under this high density limestone, and it just has higher buoyancy. So over time, and at like very, very slow rates, like a couple millimeters per year or something, these salt domes grow and like push up to the surface. So the Potrero that we see now is just like the layers of limestone that were folded up by this rising salt dome and just left standing there like after the dome eroded. And you can kind of see like the vertical layering of the limestone there. So this is a pretty cool like cross-section view because there's this canyon that just cuts into it. But yeah, it's really cool too, because like that means that, so the rock to the right is towards the inside of the Potrero. So that means that it's much, much older than the rock on the left. And you can actually kind of like notice some differences in the look and the feel like when you're climbing there. So pretty interesting. But yeah, so then like in the early 90s, I guess, people started bolting it for sport climbing. So I guess it's like a relatively new area, but that combined with like the usual sketchy qualities of limestone in general means that there's a lot of loose stuff and a lot of good rockfall potential, which I'll talk about. But yeah, so that was like the people and the plan. So the plan was for Drake and I to fly down from the States to Monterey and just take a taxi up to Hidalgo. But Dylan actually drove down from New Mexico and he scooped Michael and Austin on the way. So they just drove down and met us like a few days after we got there. But that ended up being like really big for us because having a truck down there made our lives just like a little easier for like getting around and going shopping and stuff. Also kind of a funny story, like a month or two before we left, I totally thought my passport had expired. So I thought I just like completely forgot to check for that. And I was just not going to be able to like get a new one in time. So I just spent like 5 days looking for my passport. I couldn't even find it, just like stressing so hard and like trying to think of everything I could do to like still try to make this trip work. But well, yeah, like Dylan and I ended up coming up with all these like backup plans to sneak me across the border in his truck and stuff. But turns out I was just an absolute fool. I found my passport and I'd gotten it renewed like the year before and it just totally slipped my mind. So that was a big relief. But yeah, so we made it down, no problem. But actually, like after being down there and talking with some people, we found out that we kind of messed up and ended up spending like a little more money than we had to on travel. Because apparently like the big tip is to just find some cheap way to get to Laredo. And then I think there are like really cheap buses that just take you straight to Hidalgo. So if you're thinking about heading to EPC, I definitely suggest looking into that. Or better yet, like since we're so close, just drive down, because having a car is pretty big just for like getting around town or like checking out other climbing areas nearby. But yeah, so we stayed at this campground called La Posada, which was just like a 5-minute walk to most of the climbing. Like you can see the mountain right behind. That's one of the bathrooms, I guess. But yeah, there are like a few of these campgrounds in the area, but they're all pretty much the same. They all have like bathrooms and community kitchens and little buildings to hang out or eat in. They have like movie nights and things going on, so it's pretty cool. There's like even little restaurants and bars attached sometimes. But yeah, so anyway, Drake and I only had like 2 weeks down there before we had to head back to school. So we like really wanted to make the most of our time. So our main goal for like the entire trip was to climb this like 23 pitch classic route called Time Wave Zero. And it just goes up the backside of El Toro, which is like the big mountain in the park. And we thought it was going to be like a good goal for us because it's like one of the longest climbs in the park. So yeah, and there's just a little photo on the mountain project. It's so pretty. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the only longer route is called the Scariest Ride in the Park, which is this like 5,000 foot ridge traverse that they say goes at 40 pitches. And the mountain project page is like really empty and ominous, but basically it just like follows this long, sharp ridge also to the summit of El Toro. But it's supposed to be trad, but everybody recommends you just free solo it because it's so loose and windy and scrambly that you really shouldn't fall anyway. So we decided to put that one off for next time maybe and settle for Time Wave for our big goal. We also, yeah, there's the X rating. But yeah, so we also wanted to try some of like the harder, shorter climbs in the park, because like actually the whole thing that like inspired this trip idea for me and like inspired me to ask Drake if he wanted to go was this photo that Savannah Cummins posted on Instagram of her friend Hannah Lilly, like on this 12A called Celestial Omnibus. But it's so sick. She's just climbing these like perfect, beautiful tufas, hundreds of feet off the ground. And like for those of you who don't know, tufas are these like little, they're kind of like stalactites, except they don't grow from a ceiling and they instead just like stick to overhanging walls. And they just form these cool rails of rock that are just like meant to be grabbed and climbed. But yeah, so there's that and like a few other classics that we wanted to try. Yeah, this is just the wall where Celestial Omnibus is. It's called the Outrage Wall. And I guess it's pretty hard to tell from this angle, but it is in fact pretty outrageous. It's like, it's all like kicked back to a slight angle, like overhang. And yeah, you can kind of see the streaks where like the water seeps and the tufas grow. And for scale, there's a full grown climber down there at the bottom. So this thing is just huge. It's so cool. But yeah, so I came out of last summer climbing like way harder than I ever had before. So I was feeling like really psyched on all this harder sports stuff. But unfortunately, like in early October, I was climbing with my sister at a gym and I pulled this like really big shouldery move, like I guess without warming up properly. And I just felt this like nasty, crunchy pop in my right shoulder. So I just had like horrible pain all the way down my arm for like a couple months. So I just like didn't climb at all. So I was really devastated because I thought like my entire trip was going to be ruined. But like by early December, like about a month before we left, it started feeling like good enough to climb like easy vertical or less than vertical stuff. So I was a little reassured that we could at least do like the easier multi-pitch stuff, which EBC definitely has no shortage of. But yeah, so we eventually actually made it down there. We got in like really late at night. So we woke up the next morning like nice and slow and decided to just like spend that morning like going to town and buying food and like seeing the surroundings and stuff. So we went to the store and just bought a bunch of groceries, like a bunch of produce, which was so cheap. It was so nice. And like a bunch of rice and beans and Mexican cookies and candies and like these huge cartons of egg. eggs. So here's Drake doing something weird with our eggs. But we also heard a lot about this place, this tamale place called Tamales Hidalgo, which sells tamales for like 20 cents a piece, which is so nice. So like, I think really the move is to just go there and drop like $10 and just load your pack with like 50 tamales and just live off that, which we never really got around to buying that many like at once, I guess, but we went so many times. I think it's a totally sustainable way to survive there. So yeah, so that's fun. There's their logo, pretty cool. But yeah, so once we actually started climbing, it was more of a rough start for us. Drake and I did this like 4-pitch 10A called Will the Wolf Survive? And it's like this pretty fun climb up in Los Lobos Canyon, which is this like really pretty canyon you pass right as you enter the park. And it had like these really fun sections with like cool crack climbing and even this like really fun overhanging section on the last pitch with cool exposure and stuff. And yeah, and so there were just these like awesome views up at the top. You can see all the like palm trees growing out of the cracks. It's just so cool. But yeah, so it wasn't like a particularly eventful climb until we started rappelling. Because, well, so there were like a few other parties on the route, and I guess rappelling is always pretty slow. So like the 4 rappels to get down was kind of the choke point for everyone. And we ended up rappelling right behind one party and in front of another. So like all the wrap anchors were just getting so much action. And Drake and I were at the last wrap anchor waiting for our turn to like finally reach the ground. And we just heard some like little metallic thing come bouncing down the wall and just whip past us. And we had no idea what it was. So we looked up and we heard the guys behind us, or like above us, I guess, at the anchor that we had just wrapped from, like freaking out about how one of the anchor's chains had just snapped as they loaded it, which is just horrific. Like I think we're all thankful for like redundancy in our systems, but like that's just something you never want to see happen. So we were all like super shaken up. And I like can't even imagine what it must have been like to see the anchor you're like trusting your life to snap in front of your eyes. But yeah, that was like a pretty good lesson for us, because after that we started to like really inspect every anchor before trusting it, and just like wanted to be as careful as possible in general. I think this is also the day we discovered this place called Chico's, which is just this like amazing little restaurant across the street from our campground, with probably just the best tacos I've ever had. So, because I'm vegetarian and I was kind of worried I wouldn't get to eat much tasty local food. But I guess like a lot of the restaurants up near the climbing get so much pressure from like granola vegan climbers and stuff that they just have all these great options if you don't eat meat or anything. So that was pretty nice to find out. But yeah, the next day things didn't get too much better. We still really had no idea what we were doing. So we ended up rolling out for like another remarkably slow start. So we were ready to start climbing sometime in like the early afternoon. So like without too much thinking, we kind of just threw on our darkest clothes and happened to pick a climb with probably the worst sun exposure in the entire park, called Pancho Villa Rise Again. And we also like still had no idea what we actually had to take up on climbs with us. So we just erred on the side of taking like as much stuff as possible. So we had like lunches and snacks and approach shoes and rope bag and guidebook and first aid kit and extra sunscreen, extra layers, and enough water for like 5 days on the wall, and like a bunch of other random stuff I can't even remember. And we just jammed it all into a pack for the follower to haul up the wall. So, and we just like traded off depending on which pitches we followed. So the pitches that I ended up following on that climb ended up being some of the hardest and sweatiest climbing of my life, like with the sun just beating down and like the hot rock reflecting heat onto my face and this huge pack trying to peel me backwards off the wall. So I was just like dripping in sweat, which is, you can imagine, not great for your grip on like slippery limestone. So we like finished that climb barely and crawled our way to the ridge and decided to reevaluate some of our systems. But yeah, this photo on the left is the view from like partway up the climb. And I feel like you can just see like how hot and nasty it is. There's also a lot of vegetation growing on the wall, which makes it kind of fun when you like blindly reach over a ledge or around a corner or something and set your hand down on some spiky plant. And this other photo is just from the top. You can see I got my black pants on, of course. Yeah, and this is just a view from the ridge at the top.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's El Toro, the big mountain, which is just so much bigger than what we had just climbed. We were just terrified. Yeah, this is pretty cool too. So after that, we like were messing around on some like single pitch stuff in another canyon called Virgin Canyon, and we just like heard someone behind us shout like, "Dylan, I'm off." So we turned around and spotted Michael on the ridge above us, which is pretty cool because we hadn't actually seen them yet. So yeah, that was a good surprise. Also, this is a pretty good close-up view of part of the route that I was talking about earlier called Scariest Ride in the Park. You can just see how loose and nasty it looks. Yeah, so it kind of happened that I had my birthday on this trip, like on one of the first days. And I was turning 20, so Drake and I wanted to get me my 20 birthday pitches in. So we ended up deciding to break it up into 3 climbs because unfortunately we couldn't find like one good 20 pitch climb. So we wanted to do Estrellita, which is like a 12 pitch 10 plus, and then 2 other random 4 pitch climbs. Yogi Unchained, which has this like ridiculous bolted chimney, and Access Denied, which actually had some like surprisingly fun cracks. So Drake ended up being really happy about these because they were pretty much just bolted trad lines. But yeah, it was cool. This was pretty much the day that it all clicked for us. So we woke up super early, like well before sunrise, so we could try to be the first party on Estrellita and try to move quick. So I took this cool like Alpine glow photo a few pitches up, like when the sun started coming up. We also finally figured out how to stash stuff at the base of a climb so we wouldn't have to carry like literally all of our belongings up for no reason. Yeah, so this is just the top of Estrellita at the summit palm up there, which is kind of cool. And there was like a summit register that contained like a weirdly large number of limericks for some reason. So Drake whipped one up about our climb and my birthday and stuff, but sadly I don't have any record of it, so I can't share it with you guys. But also it's probably a good thing I don't think it was really PG-13. And but yeah, you can see he's working pretty hard on this limerick in the photo. Yeah, and so this is from the other 2 climbs. The photo on the left is from the top of Yogi Unchained with just like that awesome view of the layers. And the one in the middle is the funny sport chimney on Yogi, like with the slung chalk stone with a chain that you just clipped. And the photo on the right is Drake just making a weird face at the top of Access Denied. But yeah, I guess we were pretty psyched because we finished like early afternoon, which was way earlier than we were expecting to. So that was nice. But yeah, so like after our big successful climbing day, we got tacos from Chico's again. And yeah, and when we got back to camp, I got surprised with a Costco chocolate cake that Dylan and Michael smuggled across the border. So that was pretty nice. And yeah, and then the festivities continued on for a while into the night, you know. Probably shouldn't go into too much detail here because my mom is on the call. Kidding. It's cool, Ma. Yeah, I think this is one of the next days I was feeling pretty pooped from all the climbing. So, but I guess everyone else was still feeling good and psyched, so they went out to try some like hard single pitch. So I just hung back and had a big day taking advantage of it. Nice. There was like a pool and stuff. Let's see. Yeah. Oh yeah. This was so cool. So sometimes we'd walk up into the park at night for some reason they'd be blasting these huge floodlights like up onto the cliffs, just giving them this cool lighting, which was pretty awesome. But I just think this is such a funny photo because if you look closely on the left, you see all the headlamps of people who messed up and are wrapping down in the dark. So yeah. So our next big day, we did this climb called Yankee Clipper, which everyone thinks is like pretty good training for time wave 0, which was our big goal for the trip. But it's basically this like 15 pitch long climb with the first 14 pitches like 5, 10B or easier. And then there's just this weird, uncomfortable, sharp and painful 12A face as the last pitch for no reason. And then somehow with the mysterious ways climbing grades work, I guess this makes the entire climb go at 12A, which makes it sound kind of whack when you say you're about to climb at 15 pitch 12A. But yeah, I took this photo from the top of another climb on the other side of the canyon because it's pretty funny how you can clearly see all the lines going up the wall. Because this wall is called La Selva, which translates to the jungle because of all the vegetation growing on it. So the only parts of the wall that are clear are like the routes going up, which is kind of funny. But yeah, this was also a pretty good day for us. We started like nice and early, like just before 7, I think, and we climbed like nice and efficiently. So I think we made it to the top at around 11. And Drake and I tried pretty hard on the 512 pitch, but we both kind of got shut down. So we just pulled on draws to get past the hard parts. But yeah, this photo on the right is looking down from the top. And like in that circle is the top of Estrellita at the summit palm where Drake wrote that limerick. So it's kind of cool to see everything from so much higher up. Yeah, so this is kind of an interesting story too. So we wrapped down off Yankee Clipper, and going back to this photo, we ate lunch in this weird like little metal shack thing at the base of the jungle wall. And we just sat there for a while, just like eating and chatting and figuring out if we wanted to climb more or just call it early. But we eventually decided to go check out some stuff in Virgin Canyon. So we finally stood up after like an hour in the shack thing and walked around the corner here. And as we were walking up, like right around there, not even a couple minutes after leaving the shed, we heard all these people like screaming and shouting somewhere around the corner, like rock, rock. So we just stopped and listened because we knew we were like clear of any, like it sounded like it was kind of far. And just for like 5 or 10 seconds, like it lasted for so long, we just listened to like the biggest, scariest rock fall I've ever heard. It was just this like crazy deep rumbling and exploding, and people were like yelling, and finally something sounded like this crazy like rattling or like machine gun firing. So it was terrifying. So we ran back down like to somewhere on this road, and we like got the story from somebody who saw it all happen. And basically some climbers on like the 10th or 11th pitch of a route next to Yankee Clipper called Space Boys. So this is like 1,000 feet up. They knocked down like a limestone refrigerator, I guess, and it just plummeted like halfway down the wall and just exploded after like hitting the wall somewhere. And then it just broke up into all these smaller pieces that came showering down. So I guess like the crazy rattling sound we heard at the end was actually just a bunch of the smaller debris like blasting through our little shed like a shotgun. Because so this is a photo of the roof, and it was just like terrifying to see that and like think about how we had just been sitting there for like an hour right before it happened. So yeah, like we did happen to be wearing helmets, but like helmets won't do much for you against that. And thankfully nobody got hurt. But yeah, we definitely learned our lesson to not hang out at the base of the cliff like that, like especially in a place as like loose and crowded as EPC. Yeah, this is just like a little fence just outside of the shed thing. And I think this is probably from an earlier rock fall because I can't imagine it's that uncommon. But yeah, it's scary. Yeah, so after that, like a couple of days later, I think, our campground, La Posada, organized this like big cleanup event of the entire park with this organization called Huasteca, which is honestly like a pretty rad pun, because there's this other really classic climbing area a couple hours away called La Huasteca, where I guess they focus most of their efforts. But yeah, unfortunately we didn't actually make it out there, but it seems really cool. But yeah, it was pretty awesome. Like there were probably a few dozen volunteers who made it out, and we managed to fill an entire garbage truck with trash that we picked up around the park. And then Michael, Dylan, and Drake and I also helped out with the people from Huasteca to remove some of the graffiti from like a few walls around the park. Because yeah, we were using all these like scary chemicals and stuff. And it was actually like incredibly difficult. Like the four of us were going at this little like 4x4 foot piece for a few hours, like applying a coat of this stuff, and you like let it sit, and then you scrub it like hell, and then you rinse it with water, and then you repeat that like so many times. So it's just like crazy hard work for such a tiny piece of rock. So I definitely have a lot of respect for the people with Huasteca, because the guy who was there that day said they've cleaned something like 80% of the graffiti in La Huasteca, which is just so cool to hear. Yeah, so continuing on with this little intermission from all the boring climbing stuff, I'd also like to give a good shout out to the good street dogs at APC, because they're kind of like wild crag dogs, because they just sleep at the campgrounds with the climbers, and then they like get food from everyone there. And then in the mornings, they like follow the climbers up to the park to hang out for the day. And then in the evenings, they follow the climbers back, and they just repeat this. That's just their life. So all the climbers are like really tight with these dogs, and they've given them all cool names. So like the one on the left is named Pitch Black, which is cool because there's a really classic climb in the park called Pitch Black. And then like the white dog at the bottom that's jumping up is named Scarface, because it has all these like cool like scars on its face. I don't know, and it's kind of sad actually. But and the one on top is actually named Francis, which I guess isn't that cool of a name. But Francis hung out with us a lot. That's us walking back to camp with Francis one day. Okay, yeah, so one of our like big prep days before Time Wave, we wanted to kind of experiment with something called simul-climbing, because like one really annoying thing about multi-pitch climbing is how slow it can be, because the way you usually do it, like one person leads up a pitch while the other belays, and then the other follows up and gets belayed from above by the first, and this process just goes on. So really like only one person can be moving at any given time. So the time that it takes you to get up anything is just like the sum of however long it would take you and your partner to climb it like back to back independently, like with no overlap, plus whatever time you spend at the anchors exchanging and sorting gear and drinking water and snacking and doing whatever else you might do at an anchor, which I guess doesn't sound like much, but like if you think about it, if you spend like 5 minutes at each anchor and you stop at 12 anchors on a climb, that's like an hour down the drain. So it all definitely adds up. And there are definitely like a few things you can do to improve your speed at least a little bit, like linking pitches, which means the leader just like skips anchors and climbs as many pitches as the rope length will allow at once. And that just means you end up stopping at fewer anchors and like wasting less time at them. And then you can also do something called swinging leads, which means that like rather than having one person lead multiple times back to back, you switch off at every anchor. And that just like saves a bunch of time for reasons I won't get too into. But like basically just end up not having to trade as much gear with your partner, or like flip the rope, or I don't know, do a bunch of other things. But yeah, so like even with all these methods, like you end up only edging towards the absolute best case of getting up a route in the time it would take somebody to do like all the climbing twice, just because you can only have one person actually moving at any given time. So one kind of cool solution to this problem is something called simul-climbing, which like I guess you could probably tell means that both partners climb at the same time. And like there are a bunch of different systems people have come up with to accomplish this, but like in pretty much every case, it's considerably more sketchy than like normal climbing, because you don't have a 100% attentive belayer looking after you. So yeah, so like while we were still at school, we kind of got coached by this one mentor of ours at our gym, and we like practiced some stuff. And so we ended up doing it on this climb Supernova, which is 8 pitches, and it definitely worked. Like we were really quick up and down. I think we did it all, like the climbing and the rappelling, because we were also simul wrapping the entire trip. We did it all in like 2 hours. So that was pretty awesome, but it was just so scary and unpleasant. So we just decided it was not worth it. We just stick to like swinging leads and stuff on Time Wave. So yeah, so finally it was time for a big day on Time Wave. So this is just a view of the whole route from the backside of El Toro. So like you can see the line there. And like, in all honesty, I guess it was a pretty uneventful day compared to some of our like bigger days to prepare. Because like, once again, we started climbing in the dark to try to be like one of the first parties on the route. And we also just wanted to finish before it got too hot, because the route definitely has bad sun exposure. But yeah, so like the climb ended up going like really smooth. And there was actually some really awesome climbing. Actually, like a lot of sections were really similar to like the conglomerate at El Rito, I guess. So I felt kind of right at home, like 2,000 feet up this weird mountain in Mexico. Yeah, like I was leading one of the first few pitches in the dark, like some 11 minus or something, but it had this like little overhanging section on these like perfect like cobbles and pockets. And I think maybe I just got lucky and hit the sequence just right, but it just felt like it flowed so well. And I was just in my little sphere of light from my headlamp, like high up on this wall. So it was just one of the coolest climbing experiences in my life. And I had like a really similar experience on pitch 20 or something, I think. And we were like well in daylight by then, but having that sort of flowy experience with 2,000 feet of exposure below you was just unreal. And I was just getting all giddy and giggly. It's kind of funny. But yeah, so kind of like Yankee Clipper, one of the last pitches of Time Wave is 512, making the whole thing go at 23 pitches, like a 23 pitch 512, which is kind of bogus. And also kind of like Yankee Clipper, we both got shut down by the 12, so we ended up pulling on draws. So we ended up crawling our way to the summit. So we took this pano up there where we like took turns posing and panning. But yeah, I don't know. I was up there and I kind of realized Time Wave is probably in the running for like the most contrived rock climb in the history of rock climbing, which like I guess you should probably expect from a 23 pitch fully bolted sport climb. But it's like 20 pitches of like mellow, mostly 5.9, 5.10 slab climbing. And then there's just this surprise 5.12 crux pitch, 2,000 feet off the deck. And then you're up there, and if you look like 30 feet to either side, you see clear lines that could go at like 5.8 or something. And then after that, you just have 2 more easy pitches to get you to the top of a mountain that you could totally just hike up. So yeah, and then also the thing, like Time Wave doesn't even actually get you to the top, like which nobody actually tells you. It takes you to the top of this like little side buttress thing. The summit of El Toro is there, but you get up there and you realize you're on this like little fall summit, like just below the real one, separated by like a couple hundred feet of scary loose exposed ridge. But yeah, either way, like it was really awesome to stand all the way up there and just see the entire park and see all the climbs we had done and just look out on all the beautiful mountains and desert around. So it was definitely a really cool experience, even if it's kind of a funny climb. But yeah, so that was pretty much it for like our big multi-pitch goals. So we just had some time to mess around on some of the cool single pitch stuff. So I guess a few days earlier, Drake went out and got really close to sending this classic 12A called Inglorious Bastards on his first try. So he was really psyched on getting back to finish it off. So Drake and I just went out with a friend of Michael's, who is this cool guy named Johnny. And he's like pretty into photography, so he wanted to get some cool pictures of us from above while we climbed. So that just means I have some cool photos of me climbing to show you guys. But yeah, I guess I was still feeling like a little iffy with my shoulder, so I didn't really want to like take any of this too seriously or like push it too hard. But Drake convinced me to just like go for it once, so he gave me all his beta so I could hopefully just like get it done and move on. But yeah, I think this photo is kind of tight because it looks like I'm just laying down on the ground, but like you'll have to trust me when I say I'm trying kind of hard here. This photo is kind of cool. I'm pretty sure my eyes are actually closed, but I just thought it was important to include because you can see Francis hanging down at the base with us. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. I guess while Drake was spraying me down with all his beta before I went up, I was just getting like pretty annoyed and I just wanted to climb. So when he was like talking about the end of the climb, he kept saying stuff like, yeah, you're gonna have to be super careful. Like the good holds kind of draw you out right, but they kind of just end and take you off route. So you'll have to stay left. Like even if it seems wrong, just like stick to the small holds, like stay left. But I was just getting like so fed up with him. So I was like, yeah, Drake, whatever. I know how to read rock. Like it's cool. Like I'll go for it. So this next photo, it's just me like probably right as I realized I completely messed up and ended up exactly in what Drake warned me about. Just the look on my face. But yeah, I ended up traversing back and it ended up being fine. But yeah, so that night, I guess Drake was feeling like a little tired, I guess. So he decided to stay in, but Johnny and I wanted to go back and get on the climb that like inspired the entire trip for me, Celestial Omnibus over on the Outrage wall. Also, it was kind of a cool coincidence, but like on our walk out, we actually passed Savannah Cummins, the person who took that photo and like inspired me. So it all kind of came full circle, and it's really cool because she's like this pro climber photographer. So but yeah, of course, I got pretty whooped on this climb. I was totally just bolting it by the end, but it was still so cool to like pull all those crazy moves on those tufas. And I was just like getting so excited about all the formations that I was like pulling out my phone while hanging there to take photos and stuff, and videos. Yeah, this is just a video of me drooling over this.
Yeah, whoever had the vision though,
pretty cool. Yeah, okay, so finally our last day came around and we decided to do this 11 pitch 10D that I mentioned earlier, where the people had knocked the huge death block down, the Space Boys with a Z, Space Boys. But yeah, the weather was like pretty bad, but it was supposed to be like one of the classics in the park, so we just wanted to go for it anyway. But yeah, that day ended up just being like a not so warm goodbye from the park. Is kind of just like a get the hell out of here. It was all foggy and cold and windy and wet, and water was like condensing on the rock and on us, and everything just felt so insecure and scary. Yeah, and we just like climbed up into the fog and like couldn't see anything. I think this is just a video. Yeah, so that was pretty spooky. And so I was leading the last two pitches. I was linking them, and I got to the last pitch, and like I don't know who bolted this thing or like what they were thinking, but the last pitch was just nasty. It was this like super loose like death gully. It was just all muddy and dirty and wet and all these like crazy loose blocks just waiting to go. And I'm pretty sure I saw like the rock scar from where that like rock fall came from, and there was just like so much potential for like way more stuff to come down. So yeah, that, and like while standing in the clouds here, you could like hear like rock fall coming like from around like across the canyon, just echoing through the clouds and stuff. So like it was just such a weird day, and I kind of spooked. So we like, I don't know, I just decided it wasn't worth it. So I down climbed to the last anchor and just had Drake lower me down, and then we wrapped down, and that was just the end of our trip. That was it for the climbing. but yeah, so that's pretty much all I have. I guess the climbing was really awesome. Like we did some really cool stuff and saw some amazing sights. But like I think what really made EPC special for me was just like the community there. And I'm so bad at remembering to take photos at these sorts of things, but like the parties and the campfires and just like walking around town and going to the street markets and getting tacos and margaritas after a tough day of climbing, like that's all that like made it worth it. And like what I really miss about the trip now, looking back on it, like half a year later, is just getting to meet and hang out with all these incredible, talented people from just all around the world. It's pretty cool actually. Like now I just sometimes see some of my pals from Mexico just pop up on like the Rock and Ice Instagram page and stuff. But yeah, it's just such a great tight-knit community. And I guess a big chunk of people go back consistently like every winter. So they all end up being good friends who just meet up and climb once a year. So I was totally hoping to go back this winter, but that's probably going to be a little complicated now. But either way, like I'll try to go back as soon as possible. And I definitely recommend it to anybody who gets a chance. Like it's just such a special place. But yeah, that's all I have. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Phil. But we do have a few questions for you, and everyone can please keep typing those questions into the chat. But if you're all right to go ahead, Phil, I'll start on the questions.
Yeah, for sure.
So the first one, what's the difficulty range of climbing routes at El Potrero Chico?
They really have a lot. Like there are definitely a lot of like easier multi-pitches. Well, so like you can totally do like easy single pitch stuff, like I don't know, 5.5, 5.6. And then there's even like easier multi-pitch stuff that's like max like 5.8 or something. I don't know. But then like there are also all these crazy lines. There's like the famous route called Sendero Luminoso, I think, is like it kind of goes to the top of El Toro too, and it's just like 12 after 12 after 12 after 12. It just seems crazy. Like there's a cool video of Alex Honnold free soloing it actually. But yeah, they really have like everything.
Great, thank you. Does the park do maintenance on hardware and vegetation?
Not really. That's all kinds on the climbers. Like I don't know where most of the developers are, but there are definitely these like bolt funds and stuff. Like there are like buckets when you're walking in and out of the park for you to like drop some change and like contribute to the bolt fund and like get stuff replaced, which is definitely super important if like anchors and stuff are snapping on you. But yeah.
Definitely. All right. How would you compare the grades to New Mexico areas like the Sandias?
The Sandias are just weird. I don't know. I think it's so I've only had one experience in the Sandias climbing the needle, and that was just the needle, and it was just very loose and grainy, crumbly granite. So I didn't have a whole lot of fun there. But like I guess comparing it to like sport climbing in New Mexico, like I think it is kind of softer. Like we were definitely having like a way easier time on the 12s down there than we do up here. So.
All right. Did anyone in your group speak Spanish, or were you able to get by okay with English?
Yeah, we like didn't really end up having to use too much Spanish. Like one night we were sitting at some like taco truck in town and like kind of away from all the climbing, so that was cool. And we like sat at this table with some locals and we just like chatted, and we were speaking in Spanish with them, so that was fun because Drake and I like took Spanish in high school and like maybe a semester or two in college. And Michael knows like a little bit too, but Dylan didn't know really any Spanish, and he was fine. So.
All right. So there were a couple questions about that anchor piece that broke.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know, was it an actual chain link that broke, or or was it the hanger that caused the chain to fall off?
Yeah, so it was a link. And I was trying to look for like a photo on the Facebook page or something if somebody got a picture. But yeah, because I guess I think it was the like highest link that connects to the hanger, and the hanger was just like eating into the link, and, like kind of worn through. And yeah, so that's what snapped. It was the link.
All right. What time of year were you there? It looked like you had good weather except for that last day.
Yeah, so it was what was January? We were there January 2nd to the 16th, I think. And that, I think that's kind of the season. Like people usually start showing up in like November and stay until like maybe February or March.
And kind of related, is there a community of local climbers at EPC as well, or mostly travelers, Americans, Europeans? Who'd you see there?
It's like it's a pretty good mix. There were, for some reason, a lot of people from Canada, and then definitely some people from like Monterey and stuff. But I think like mostly Americans, and actually like mostly people from Austin, because I think it's like 6 hours from Austin. So I guess it's like kind of doable as a weekend trip, like a long weekend trip. So yeah.
Wow, yeah. Okay, somebody says, thanks for including the bit about the park cleanup, and thank you all for doing that. Did you find that it was well taken care of overall, or no?
I think, I don't know. I think they try to do these cleanups like once a month. So that's pretty cool to see. But yeah, like it doesn't have a whole lot of traffic from like people outside of the climbing community, and I think the climbers are generally pretty respectful of the area. So it did seem like pretty good to me. Like I don't know, it's kind of strange though. Like I forgot what night it is, like, but every Sunday night or something, like it seems like hundreds of cars just like pull up into this like one parking lot, like just outside of the park. And there's this like crazy, like all night bender there. And they kind of leave a lot of trash. And that happened like a couple of days after the cleanup. So like, that's kind of sad to see, but yeah, like other than that, yeah, it's pretty well taken care of.
That's good. You said you might not get back there this winter. Do you have a next trip planned?
Oh man, I don't know. Not really.
I think they meant like anywhere else. Climbing.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I really want to go back. Like just talking with the people who like drove down there, and like hearing about like all the freedom they had to like check out all these areas that I like hadn't even heard of. That just sounded so cool. So I definitely want to like go back and spend more time. Like there's this one area really close called El Salto, which is like this cool limestone canyon that just has like endless, like it's mostly shorter, like hard stuff. But Dylan made it there for like a week or something. He just left EPC and drove to EPC or to El Salto with some people. And that just sounded so cool. So I definitely want to like go back and spend more time just like in that area in general.
All right, I think that was it, and we are just after 8. So, if anybody has some last minute questions, get them in. Otherwise, Phil, thank you again for sharing your climbing trip with us. And if anyone would like to join us again, our next scheduled talk is tomorrow night at 6. It'll be a virtual visit to the Harrell House of Natural Oddities in Albuquerque. And then we have another astronomy presentation coming up this Friday night at 7. And you can see those all on the PEEC website. You can get more information and register. And yeah, just Phil, there's lots of people writing in. Thank you so much, and chatting their thanks for sharing. And
thank you, everyone.
All right, I think with that, I'll say one more thank you for everybody for tuning in, and the Mountaineers for partnering with PEEC. We so appreciate it, and everybody have a good night.